What's going on, guys? I'm here today for a very special interview with Andy. Andy Wang is an accountant. He works with us at Clinic Mastery. He helps so many of the clinics that we work with to really understand their finances and their numbers, to take the fear out of it so that they feel confident and comfortable to be in control and in charge of the numbers behind the business. So, Andy, thank you for joining us today, my man.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me along. And oof, what an intro. That's very humbling. Thank you.
What an intro. And for those watching along at home, that was number 4. We had 3 takes to get there. So we eventually got there. Now, I do have to ask about the little Vegeta in the background there, the little Dragon Ball Z, because you've actually inspired me, because I was thinking, what's the next thing I'm going to get in my background? I thought just there's going to be a little Vegeta for my own one because he's my favorite. But I'm interested to hear what made you choose Vegeta over Goku when we're thinking Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah, I know, right? Everyone loves Goku. Do you know what it is? From a young age, I used to wake up every morning, watch Cheese TV before
Mm,
school, and Dragon Ball was on. And I remember Vegeta just rolled in just so confidently, even though he got his ass kicked by Goku. The main thing was
yeah.
he kept coming back and he
Yeah.
kept getting better through hard work. And as a young kid, I remember thinking, oh, that's a really good message. I can achieve anything through hard work. And it just felt like a really good message that got delivered. And so he stuck in my mind.
Love it, mate. Love it. And I mean, I loved Vegeta for maybe different reasons. He was just the bad boy, and I thought it was just really cool
Yeah,
how he went about
that
things.
too.
That too, the hard work, mate. So that's fantastic. Watch this space. We're gonna have a new little figurine up here in no time.
So
Now,
cool.
Andy, let's jump into the meat of it real quickly. The reason we're having this conversation, the day we're filming this, it's Saturday, the 29th of April, which means we're coming up to the end of the financial year here in Australia. Now, this is a time where a lot of people feel stressed because they're really forced now to look at their numbers. For a lot of business owners, tax is also due in a couple of weeks' time, so that can be stressful as well for the previous year. And it can just be a time of really sitting down and looking at what is the year that's been with your accountant. And it can be a fantastic time, or it can have a few surprises if you haven't been tracking it closely along the way. So I was hoping, Andy, today to first dive into what are what are some things that clinic owners should be doing coming into the end of the financial year to make sure that they're prepared coming up to June 30th?
The most important thing I find, and some owners might already do this, but with a lot of clients that come to us, I often ask the question, hey, let's do tax planning together. Is this a service that you were doing previously?
Yeah.
Would you like this service? And the amount of people who actually say, I don't know what that is, I've never done that with my accountant, is actually staggering. So if you're a clinic owner, if there's one takeaway from this video, if you're not doing tax planning, ask your accountant, Mr. Accountant, Mrs. Accountant, can we do tax planning together? Preferably before 30 June. You want to get it in, you want to have this meeting in place around latest early June, right? The main reason for that is because it gives you, a business owner, the chance to actually have the peace of mind
Mhm.
knowing that your accountant is reviewing the numbers before the year is over. They're giving you an estimate of where they think you'll end up on from a tax perspective, but the good thing about getting in early is that it gives you a massive heads up. Think about it. Think about it. The tax this year, so
Mhm.
the 2023 tax year, isn't generally due until March or May next year. So you're getting almost a year heads up.
Mm.
Not just that, but if there's any strategies that need to be done before 30 June, you've got now time to do it. There's no point having, I'm not a fan of having the annual tax meeting reflecting on the financials just passed, because for a lot of people, they might not get their tax returns done until months after the end of the financial year. So if
Mm.
you're doing a meeting then about numbers maybe sometimes 9 months ago, it's
Yeah.
kind of pointless. So swap that meeting out if you're having it and you're not finding value in it, for a tax planning meeting instead.
Yeah. And when you're talking a tax planning meeting, because this is going to be a new concept for a lot of people. And in fact, before I had worked with you, I hadn't done tax planning before. Tax planning for me was planning to take the money out of my bank and put it into the ATO's coffers. That was all it was. And so when you introduced this new concept to me, Like you went over a few things there, but talk to me about it. It's essentially it's a meeting where you sit down and you look at different scenarios and then what could play out if you were to go with A, B, or C, essentially, right?
That's right. Yeah. From a tax planning point of view, the name of it sounds like, hey, we're just planning for tax. But reality is in the meeting, you go through so much more than that. So what happens is the accountant would normally do some preparation in advance, look at your numbers. They sort of do a bit of a mini forecast saying, hey, here's where we actually are in March, April, June, whenever you're doing the meeting. And then say, okay, imagine you keep going at the rate you're going at. Here's where you
Mm.
end up. Here's what your taxes will look like. So that's like the real general stuff that you get from tax planning. But then the extra things you can get is you get to look at, well, you get to ask the questions where you say, hey, if I bought all this equipment for the clinic, if I bought an electric vehicle in the business, for example, if I set up a new clinic to do ABC, you run the scenarios by the accountant, and in real time, they should be able to give you a bit of feedback saying, hey, if you put this much money into super, if you bought that car, if you did this, here's where your new tax position would be. And as a clinic owner, as a business owner, and as a person, you can make an informed decision knowing, okay, my tax bill would be $100,000, for example. But if I put this much money into super, I'm now going to be, short a certain amount of money, but then my tax bill is going to come down by whatever it might be. So it gives you clarity to make a financial decision.
And just, I guess, with that, something that you said to me early on, and you probably don't even remember this, but it stuck with me in our first ever tax planning meeting. It was you said, Peter, it's not how much money you make, it's how much money you keep. And I think that really rings true. Is it's like it's not the business or the business owner who can create the most revenue or even creating the most profit. It's who can actually take home the most there, that's going to provide you the lifestyle that you're after. It's going to allow you to support your family, your friends, whatever your charitable donations that you want to do. And so that was something that for me really changed my mindset, because I almost was like, if I get taxed a lot, it means I made a lot, and that's awesome. But what if you didn't have to be taxed that much on how much you made? So I thought that was a really nice reframe that you gave me very, very early on. Now, you said something there as well that was interesting. And I know this is a contentious point for you and I, because you always say, you know what I'm going to say, right? You always say, Pete, what if you put a little bit more money into super, right? And I've never been a fan of that hugely, but I do like it. And the example of that you sort of said before, but even to put some sort of figures around it, if you were looking at a $20,000 tax bill, for example, and then looking at going, well, if we put $30,000 into super, then your tax bill would be $10,000, say. So realistically, you're getting an extra $10,000 in that example. You're paying $10,000 less in tax. You don't see that money up front. How does that, I guess, how does the thinking change around this? Is it any different should someone be younger versus older? Does the tax planning change for someone who's in their 50s or 60s and coming up to retirement versus maybe someone who's 30 years old?
It does. There's a few factors involved. One is age. So definitely the older you are, the more likely you're going to put more money into super because
Yeah.
you can access it sooner, right? It's almost like you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Whereas, Pete, for you, and look, I'm in a similar boat where
Yeah.
I'm always questioning, do I do it? Because it's still a good 30 years away, 40 years away. And by the time I'm that age, it's probably going to move another 10 years. So it's going to be 50 years away or 40 years away. So yes, age plays a difference, but also personality type plays a difference and how you believe the future will look like. So what I'm finding is those business owners who really value wealth creation, they love running their business. They love just making money, making products, making services, and they're expanding their empire, for lack of a better term, all the time. They seem to focus a little less on super because for them, the retirement age is way sooner. Whereas for the business owners who take the approach of, no, I'm doing this because I love spending time with the family, and this gives me the level of freedom I'm after up until the point where I retire. Those business owners seem to focus on super more. So it's age, but also temperament and belief of what your life is going to look like and what you want it to look like.
And speaking of belief as well, now this was another thing you said to me early on, and I don't know if you remember saying this one. You said a mistake that you see a lot of young people make who are making good money is that they believe they're going to make good money forever. They believe that because I make X now, I'm going to make more in the coming years, and that people can make, I guess, poor decisions around that. I don't remember saying that one to me, but that really stuck with me and really helped me to think about what should I be doing in the moment now from a tax planning perspective, from an investing perspective, even from a super perspective,
Mm.
in order to ensure the future.
Yeah, absolutely. That one I don't remember. I do remember the spending versus income one, because
Yeah.
I remember at the time actually there was a couple of clients I was working with who were really high income individuals who had been high income individuals for a while, but they didn't have a whole lot to show for it in their current state. And that was a massive wake up call for me, where I thought, I thought everyone put aside money, whether it's in a zombie apocalypse account and also for investment and also to build a nest egg, but it wasn't the case. And I made sure that everyone I spoke to, I was making that reminder for. Uh,
Mm.
but yes, from income earning perspective for a young person, at the time when you earn good money, you sometimes feel invincible, right? It's almost like, yeah, I've got this, I've got life sorted.
Mm.
But not to sound really, down, but life can play a lot of different, I guess, roles, and it can turn out really differently. And it's not about being a doomsday prepper, but making sure that, hey, you have enough set aside so you have staying power. Think
Mm.
about what happens in a recession period, right? Assuming there's no government intervention, when a recession comes through, all the businesses which don't have a certain amount of quality, don't have their systems and their marketing or whatever sorted out, don't have a team who are going to back them in those hard times,
Mm.
and don't have enough war chest money in the bank, they're going to be flushed out.
Yeah.
So having a bit of staying power for the business and for yourself personally, super important.
And I'd love to know as well, just on that, because you sort of talked the war chest, the zombie apocalypse fund, two names for sort of the same thing there. Is maybe this is a two-part question actually.
Mm.
One is how does a business owner decide what that should be? And the second part of that question is going to be, it's a bit long-winded, so we'll get back to it in a second, but it's basically around, I believe personally that we make better business decisions when we're coming from a place of financial abundance rather than scarcity. And I think we saw that a lot through COVID, a lot of challenges if we didn't have enough funds there for ourselves personally, for the business, that we were forced to make business decisions that we didn't want to have to make. So if we jump back to the first part, how does a clinic owner decide how much should be in this zombie apocalypse fund? I've seen wildly different percentages of revenue, of profit, like of team members, etc. So I'm interested to know what comes to mind for you.
I'll just clarify one thing first.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was throwing a little bit of jargon around. I really try not to, but when it came to finances, those were the terms I labeled these accounts. So for your listeners out there, I call it the war chest and the zombie apocalypse account the same thing. Essentially, it's an account. It's your oh crap account, right?
Yeah.
If you earn no income, what are you going to live off of? The money in those accounts. So the war chest is what I call the one in the business, and the zombie apocalypse is the one I call the one in my own personal name, right?
Okay.
You could call them the same thing.
Yeah.
If you're a learner from Barefoot Investor, it's like the fire extinguisher account. That's what he calls it. Okay.
Yeah.
So, from a business point of view, how does a clinic owner know how much to put aside? Every clinic owner, you're right, it does differ. And this also applies from a personal point of view. I find it is dependent on the person, the business owner's need for security. How much do they need to feel secure? Some people fly by the seat of their pants and go just month on month. Look, I wouldn't recommend that. I recommend having a month at least, right? But then
Yeah.
some people need a lot. They need 6 months, and that's a bit too much. When COVID started, I used to always say have minimum 3 to 6 months. Okay.
Yeah.
But going through COVID, what I found was a lot of business owners pivoted really quickly, and and they cut their expenses really quickly and they got innovative. We're entrepreneurs, we're business owners. Of course, we're going to get innovative. So I found between 1 to 2 months is generally enough, because that's saying, hey, you're leaving the doors open, the lights on for 1 to 2 months, assuming you have no income whatsoever, which is very unlikely to happen. If another pandemic hit, the money printers go, go burr, and then the government sends out stimulus, right?
Yeah.
Assuming that happens. And as a business owner, you start cutting expenses. So to answer your question, Pete, how do people come up with that figure? From a budgeting point of view, as a business owner, you want to know what is that monthly amount you need to keep the lights on and the doors open. Okay, so what I would do is I go through this process called almost like a expenses audit, for lack of a better term. A sexier way to call it would be like, imagine rebuilding your business from the ground up, where you're not dealing with any of the previous baggage and you're rebuilding it from a financial perspective. So it's almost like you're sitting down with a blank page and saying, hey, if this business were to run now and I can rebuild it to its current size now, what expenses do I need? Once you have all of those, you should have a monthly figure. And with that monthly figure, it's really easy to see, do you currently make that monthly figure through your billings? If it's a yes, great. Then aim to have 1 to 2 months of that monthly figure in a war chest account. What that does, staying power, right? Think about this. That's 1 to 2 months. You make zero income and you keep all your expenses exactly the same. That's peace of mind. And like I said, how much you have depends person by person. Some people need more peace of mind, some people need less. So personally, I have 2 months for the business and I have 3 months for myself, my wife, the family, for ourselves personally.
Beautiful. And just to clarify with that one, do you include salaries within that as expensive for every single team member? Yeah.
Yes, I include everything, including my own salary,
I like that.
because the business is what pays me. So I need to be included in there, because then on top of my 3 months, I know the business can keep paying me as well. What that also does is this: by including everything, if times get really tough, they don't just bang happen immediately, right? You sort of start seeing things peter down. The moment you start seeing that, you can react and you can trim down expenses, negotiate with your suppliers and things like that. So really that 1 to 2 months lasts you a fair bit longer than that 1 to 2 months.
No, definitely. I think that the reason I asked, does that include wages, is that's the most common question I get asked from clinic owners, is because in a healthcare clinic, wages make up probably 50 to 60%, sometimes even more. If you including the clinic owner wages, it could be 70% of all the money that goes out, or even of all the money that comes in as well. So if you're considering for a healthcare clinic, and this was a question I got through COVID, where initially we were sort of talking whether it was 1 month, 2 months. Some people wanted 6 months. 6 months for some people was $500,000 to be putting in the bank, depending on the size of the team. And it's just, again, like you said, it comes down to risk tolerance and where you're at financially, the security that you have outside of the business. Your expenses there, I think, are important too. Someone who's got a family, maybe a partner who's not working, kids, big home, big mortgage, etc., that's got financial pressure, is different from someone who owns everything, has no debt, essentially, and very, very few costs. So
That's right.
So dependent on the person. But I think I really like the 1 to 2 months of everything to give yourself that financial security, including your own salary, and then having your own zombie apocalypse fund. And I like the distinction of the two there.
The other way to think about it is look, it doesn't have to be a war chest account in the business. The concept is, do you have access to that money in case the business needs it? Do you have access to that money in case you and your family need it, right? So wherever it's sitting, have it available. It's just, say, it happens running out of a company. When you draw out money, it's generally you're taxed higher than if you just tax it in the company. So people leave it in the company.
Yeah. Now, I'm interested as well. This is something that I often get asked. And when I said I was having a chat to you today, I asked a few clinic owners if you could ask Andy any questions at all. what would you ask him? And I told it had to be finance related as well, which really stumped them then, because like, oh, well, that takes out all the interesting ones we were going to ask. Like, why did you change your hair? It looks fantastic. All those sorts of things. But a key one that came up is, what are common blind spots that healthcare clinic owners have around their finances?
Mm. This one, I think, extends to not just healthcare clinic owners, but because I work with mostly healthcare clinic owners, it's also really common for them. When new clients come over to me and they've never done tax planning before, one of the first things we look at is their structure, because a lot of clinic owners, whether they've just started, whether they've been trading for a while, might not be structured right. And when I say structure, is how do you do your business, whether you're a sole trader, whether you're operating out of a company, whether you're coming out of a trust, right? If all those words sound foreign, please chat to your accountant about it. But essentially, the structure, the way you're operating, running the business that worked for you before might not be suitable for you moving forward as your clinic grows. And here's the reason why it's so important to get it right. The longer you wait to change, the more expensive that process gets, because as your clinic grows, you hire more people, the value of your business increases. So in the eyes of the law, there normally is some sort of transfer of value, which tax. So the longer you wait, the more expensive it gets. And the more money you start making, if you're not structured right, the more it costs you from a tax point of view as well. So structure is one of the biggest blind spots I see. Okay, so that's number one.
Just to jump in, sorry, we're going to
yes.
jump in on that one real quickly.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, because I think people might not realize where that tax, like why they're paying tax, right? And just full disclosure here, I was one of those people as well early on in my business career. We went from a partnership to a company, and we definitely left it too long, to the point where the business had too much value. And the issue, from my perspective, correct me if I'm wrong, was that we went from Peter Flynn owned those shares to putting it in a company, and the shares in the company were owned by the trust. And so technically it's no longer me owning it. So it's not like I was just giving like myself the shares. I was selling the shares to the trust, which was going to hold the shares of the company. And that's when you sell something, and that something has value in the markets. As part of what we do in society, we pay tax on that gain. And then, like you said, the longer people leave it, the more expensive it's going to be. So it's very important to get right early on.
That's right. And it's something which it stumps a lot of people. They're like, hang on, I'm kind of moving it from left hand to right hand. And no one's paying me. Why do I need to pay tax on this? Unfortunately, it is a thing. There are concessions you can have, but regardless, speak to your accountant about that. But structure, review it. If you're doing tax planning with your accountant, ask them, hey, am I still structured appropriately? Okay. That's the biggest blind spot. It's interesting because it applies across the board to a lot of different business owners. And it's something which could have been fixed for a lot cheaper years ago. And oftentimes I see it left way too late. The second, or another blind spot which I often see, is in that tax planning point is your perfect chance to review the numbers while you're kind of semi-live. We're not talking about numbers from 9 months ago, but semi-live numbers up to date. Because think about it. Most people want an accountant to be really proactive, digging in their numbers every week or every month. But unfortunately, most people aren't going to pay an accountant the engagement, the project fees to basically have a full-time CFO, right? And unless you yourself are lucky enough to be really good with numbers, or you've got someone around you who can do that for you, a lot of people's accountants play the role of doing your best, doing your tax, and hopefully at least doing your tax planning, okay? And a bit of ad hoc advice. So if you're not doing that tax planning part, it's almost like you're not getting that financial review. And I don't know about Pete, I know you're pretty good with numbers. You're actually really proactive with that sort of stuff. But a lot of business owners, not even clinic owners, but business owners, don't feel comfortable with the numbers. And if they don't feel comfortable with it, they're not looking at it on a frequent basis. So that tax planning is so important. And that second blind spot is, hey, I didn't even know this is where I am right now. And if I didn't know where I am, things may have felt tough from a cash flow perspective. And until you get clarity on it or speak to someone about it, you can't really do anything about it because you just know things feel tough. Why? So use that opportunity to have that conversation.
And I think a common symptom of this is if you ever feel like you get blindsided by a tax bill or a super bill, or there's a bill that you weren't expecting, especially one to the government or for super or PAYG, that's normally a surefire sign that you're not on top of those numbers, because those are things that you can see coming from a mile away. If you're looking through your numbers in Xero or QuickBooks or MyOb or whatever it may be. Now, I guess just as an extension of that one, I'd say, and this was me earlier on in my career, and this is what I see a lot in clinic owners, which is very relevant to this. I wanted to sort of expand on this a little bit. Is I find people, clinic owners, myself back in the day, I would look at the numbers more frequently when things were going really well. And when things weren't going well, and I knew that they weren't going well, or a clinic owner knows that it's not going as well as they want it to, they actually actively avoid looking at the numbers because of how it makes them feel. It makes you feel bad. It makes you feel like you're failing or you're going backwards. And so they'll avoid looking at the numbers. And I believe personally that that's the time we should be looking at the numbers the most and looking at them daily, weekly, focusing on those, because if those numbers go down, the health of the business goes down. And the last thing we want is to be in a position where we've got these bills come due that mean we're trading insolvent because we've ignored it for too long. So just thought I'd get your thoughts on that, if you see that at all.
Look, not only do I see that, but also in the past, I've probably been guilty of it in a previous lifetime where I was racking up credit card debts and I just didn't want to look at those accounts because I just knew they were a bit higher than they should have been. So absolutely, from a human psychology point of view, totally get it and completely agree. You're right. When things are tougher, you want to have the regular habit of doing your checks and balances. If you don't have the habit of doing your checks and balances and you don't know what to look at as part of those checks and balances, so like what is your sort of 5-step monthly number review process? What are you looking at? If you don't have that, get that in place ASAP. Work with the team at Clinic Mastery, work with your accountant to get that in place. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be intimidating. As long as someone shows you what to look at, they show you what it means, so you create an understanding yourself, then you're literally repeating the same process every single month, for example. And by the 3rd month, you're going to get a pretty good understanding about how to do it moving forward. It stops being intimidating. And that probably leads me to one of the other areas, is that around this time, this tax planning meeting, if you don't do it, or if you do it but you don't know what to ask, if you don't feel confident with your numbers, get the education from your accountant. Ask them, hey, can you review my numbers monthly for the next 3 months at the end of every month? And I just shadow you. I'm just going to sit in on the meeting and you just talk me through your way of looking at everything, just so I can learn. And through that, as a business owner, you're going to start picking up what your accountant's going to look at, what a finance person is going to look at. And then you're going to start knowing what you should look at too.
And I really like that. And just on that one, I've talked about this recently. Jim Quick, the memory guy, talks about how to retain more information. And so if you go into a meeting like that, what I'd get you to do beforehand is get your accountant to write down a series of questions that he wants you to answer at the end of it. So answer those questions as you're going through. And then directly after that, write down, why must I use this? So answer this question, why must I use this? How will I use this? And when will I use this? And by completing that small task at the end, you're going to retain so much more of that valuable information that your accountant has gone through.
I like that.
Little snippet. You can use that one. That one's
thank you, Jim Quick. I like it. That's excellent.
Now we are. I don't even know what time we're up to now, but it's definitely getting on. So I want us to kind of sum this up together. So if you were going to give clinic owners who are watching this one key action, so one key thing to leave this today and go and do, what would it be?
Okay. For the clinic owners who don't have any sort of before 30 June planning, chat to your accountant, have the conversation, book the session in. For the clinic owners who already have some sort of planning session, if it doesn't cover anything beyond just tax, ask yourself the question, okay, how do I use this time most effectively? I'm going to be sitting down with my accountant for this amount of time. The tax can be covered quickly if you've done it before. So what else can I ask to really improve my situation? Even ask the accountant what they think you should know and where else they can help.
Yeah, I love it. It's simple. One of two there, one of two, my friends. Now, just to finish up, shameless plug here for Andy Wang, my accountant, absolute legend. And for those of you that may not have an accountant, may be early on in business and you're kind of just doing things yourself by a spreadsheet, which I definitely did in my first year or so, it is well worthwhile investing in a professional. Every dollar you spend, you'll get back tenfold. And I could not recommend this man highly enough. The work he's done for me and my companies, and even just my financial education and financial literacy has been absolutely outstanding. And there is not much of a better feeling as a clinic owner, as a business owner, than feeling super confident in your numbers, and that the numbers are creating a solid foundation for your business that you can focus on doing the things that you love, and you don't have to worry about these things, because at the end of the day, what you earn is a reflection of the value that you bring to your team, to your community, to your clients. And we need a solid foundation of numbers to build that on. And that's where someone like Andy Wang comes in. So thank you for joining us, Andy.
So humbling. Thank you so much. Always, I'm not great at promoting myself, so I always, feel very humbled when you give me the shout outs. Thank you, Pete.
It's been a pleasure. I will leave Andy's email down below. If you would like to contact him, feel free. As always, if you have any questions or you want to put any comments, I respond to them all myself. It's not a bot, it's a real person. Might not be great responses, but it is me. I'll chat to you in the comments below, my friends, and then we'll see you in the next lesson.